Filipino horror. If you're Filipino, you've probably seen at least one of them, and if you haven't, you should. I remember the first ever Filipino horror film I've watched was a film called
Maria Leonora Teresa.
It scared 7-year-old me so bad, I could not be left alone at all, especially when dolls were in the room.
My name is Teresa, and I'm a good girl.
That was probably the scariest thing I've ever seen at that point in my life. However, recently, my friends and I decided to rewatch the movie for fun, and it was hilarious.
Wala akong anak na demonyo!
I have no idea if it was because I was with them, but that fear sort of went away. I was always scared of how the dolls looked or moved since it looked so unnatural and uncanny, but watching it now made me question why I was even scared of it in the first place. But it did open my eyes and made me realize how special this piece of cinema actually is, and not just this film, but the whole genre of horror. So I questioned myself and thought, why does Filipino horror feel so different? At the surface, it might seem like a typical horror film with the common tropes such as suspense and build-ups, then eventually the coveted jump scare that makes horror, well, horror. But what makes Filipino horror so different from the rest has nothing to do with those things. It actually lies within the story itself and the inspiration for the film altogether. You see, Filipino horror doesn't tackle the traditional horror elements such as ghosts, demons, those sort of stories. They may include them, but for very different reasons. I noticed that Western cinema typically portrays demons based on the very well-known grimoire that is Ars Goetia. Films like Hereditary, Last Exorcism, Constantine, and even whole franchises such as The Conjuring and Paranormal Activity
Bruh, I'm gonna have to level with you. This don't look right.
Primarily rely on their very well-known antagonists to create the suspense of the film and deliver that powerful jump scare at least once. But Filipino horror doesn't just go for what demon or ghost is trending at the moment. It stays true to its roots and focuses primarily on tradition. Now, you may say, that's every horror movie. Take The Ring for example. You see, The Ring, or The Grudge, isn't really a Western movie. It was made into a Western movie based on Japanese myth and folklore. The Philippines, at least to my knowledge, has not had any of its creatures featured in a Hollywood film. If they did, well, this whole video is pointless. Anyway, going back to our main question, let's go back to my favorite film, Maria Leonora Teresa. The whole plot of the movie revolves around the Filipino superstition and folklore of witch doctors, or albulario, and how their supernatural powers, in this case, his supernatural powers, was able to transport these evil spirits into dolls that looked like the children who passed away earlier in the film, and basically gave them to the grieving parents of those same children. Seems simple enough, right? That's where you're wrong. It goes way deeper than that. As the film progresses, we slowly learn about all the secrets and corruption that caused the so-called witch doctor to do what he did. This approach of slowly unraveling the events and even the main villain himself is what made me truly appreciate this film. It doesn't go over the top for jump scares, but I don't even know if they're considered jump scares at this point. They're hilarious. But reels in the viewer towards its intriguing story and how everything led up to that point. Again, you might say that's every horror film, and yes, I agree with you. To an extent. However, what separates this story from others is how it actually is able to correlate itself with real-life events. The Philippines is known for its corruption and all of its secrets. As someone who was born and raised there, it is painstakingly obvious. And this film, even though it was released more than 10 years ago, was able to give us insight into the real world events that were happening and are still happening to this day. Speaking of corruption, greed is without a doubt the most prominent one. Those apply to politicians though. Corporate greed, on the other hand, is very uncommon, especially when it comes to milking movies. I'm talking about You, The Conjuring. Filipino films in general, not just horror, always give you a conclusion without you having to beg for a sequel and wait years for a mediocre one to come out. Some people may not like that, but I'm the one making this video and I love it, so deal with it. This video may just turn out to be a Maria Leonora Teresa breakdown, but it actually answers the question we were all wondering. Why does Filipino horror feel so different? And you just heard it. The story, the inspiration, staying true to its roots, tracing back to traditional myths and folklore, the real world events that transpired, and how the film is able to merge them into one coherent and freely flowing storyline. That's what makes Filipino horror feel so different. And that's why no one should be ashamed of their culture. Be proud of who you are and where you're from, because at the end of the day, we all have something unique. Honestly, the real reason is because of the actors. So I'm in the middle of editing this, and I just found this mistake I did, and I thought it was so funny. Painstakingly obvious. And this film, even though it was released more than 10 years ago, was able to give us insight into